Hi everyone, welcome to the third video in this series on Pythagoras' theorem and trigonometry. Today we're going to start doing a few more calculations, and our goal today is to find the length of the hypotenuse. And remember, hypotenuse just means the longest side in a right-angled triangle. So let's get right into it. Hopefully by now you have seen this diagram a few times, and I'm really hoping that well into the future you'll remember what Pythagoras' theorem tells us. So Pythagoras' theorem is a formula which tells me about the relationship between the side lengths in a right-angled triangle. So if A and B are the shorter sides, and C is the longer side, or the hypotenuse, what's the formula? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That needs to roll off your tongue. You need enough practice so that you've got this memorized. So, now that we remember Pythagoras' theorem, we're ready to apply it to calculate C. That's what we're going to be doing today. So basically, I'm going to give you A and B as numbers, and I'm going to ask you to calculate the remaining number, which in this case will be C. So let's do some examples. So if you are doing a calculation like this for the very first time, what I recommend you do is you label the sides A, B, and C. And remember, C must be the hypotenuse. Or the longest side. Facing outwards from the right angle, which I've labeled with an arrow here. Okay, so Pythagoras' theorem tells us A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And I've given you this triangle with side lengths 3 and 4. And I want to find x, which is the length of the hypotenuse here. So let's replace A, B, and C with the numbers 4, 3, and x, respectively. So 4 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared. Now, we can continue with this calculation. We can simplify 4 squared. Remember, when I square a number, it just means to take that number and multiply it by itself. So 4 squared just means 4 times 4, and that gives me 16. 3 squared means 3 times 3, which gives me 9. And all of that equals x squared. Now, I can add 16 and 9 together, and that gives me 25. Okay. Now, I want to find x. Right now, I don't have x, I have x squared. So I need to do something to both sides to get me from x squared to x. And the step that we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of both sides. Most of the time, you're going to need to use a calculator, and you're going to need to find this symbol. It looks like that. That's the square root symbol. And you will input 25 into the square root. The square root means find me the number which, if I multiply it by itself, gets me, in this case, 25. So if you think back over your knowledge of multiplication and times tables, is there a number that I can multiply by itself to get 25? And the answer is yes. That number is 5, because 5 times 5 gives me 25. Now, I should note, here we assumed that x is positive. That is, it was representing a length, so I don't need to worry about writing x equals plus or minus 5 or plus or minus root 25. If you've solved quadratic equations, you know there are two solutions, but in this case, because we're dealing with length, we implicitly assume that x was a positive number, and so we can just throw away the negative solution, negative 5. Okay, so that's the solution. The 3, 4, 5 triangle is the simplest case of a right-angled triangle where the lengths are whole numbers. So we're done. All right, I'm going to do this a couple more times. If the process is exactly the same, but yeah, if you're feeling a bit rusty or you haven't seen this before, it'll be helpful for you to go through these examples. So let's do another one, and I'm going to go a little bit more quickly this time. So again, let's label the sides A, B, and C. And remember, I must use C for the longest side, which is the hypotenuse. So let's fire away. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And I can substitute A, B, and C with the numbers in my diagram. So in this case, it's going to be 24 squared plus 7 squared equals x squared. Now, I don't personally know 24 squared off the top of my head, so I'm going to need a calculator. You can use your calculator. This is just a CAS, but any calculator will do here. So 24 squared is 576. 7 times 7 is 49. And if I add those two numbers together, I get x squared. So this here simplifies to 625, and that equals x squared. Now let's think back. Remember, my goal is to write down at the end x equals some number. I don't have x yet. I have x squared. So I need to do something to both sides of the equation to get from x squared to x. What should we do? Well, we should take the square root of both sides. If I do one thing to one side of the equation, I have to do it to the other side as well, so that the equality is preserved. So I took the square root of x squared to get x, which means I must take the square root of the left-hand side as well. If you don't know the square root of 625 off the top of your head, you'll need to use your calculator, and that's totally fine. So the symbol looks like this. I type in the number 625, and the answer is going to be 25. Okay, so x equals 25. And we're done. So the numbers 7, 24, and 25 form a right-angled triangle. Now, one thing you'll notice in these two examples is I got a whole number as my answer. In the first example, I got x equals 5. In the second example, I got x equals 25. Most of the time, this isn't going to happen. Most of the time, you're actually going to get decimals, and you're going to need to round your answer. So I'm just going to show you very quickly one more example where we have to do this. Okay. So this time I've got side lengths of 8 and 13, and my hypotenuse is labeled x. So our first step is to label the sides A, B, and C. And a question that I often get from students is, does it matter if I call the letter A, the number 8 A or B? Like, can I swap A and B and do this instead? And the answer is yes. It's not going to change the calculation for x in this instance. So it's up to you. No matter what you do, as long as you choose A and B to be the shorter sides, you will get the same answer for C. Okay, so let's start by writing Pythagoras' theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And let's replace A, B, and C with the numbers that were given in the question. So this time it's going to be 8 squared plus 13 squared equals x squared. Okay, 8 times 8 gives us 64. 13 times 13 gives us 169. And if I add those two numbers, I get x squared. You can use a calculator if you don't know 13 times 13. That's totally fine. Okay, if I add 64 and 169, I'm going to get 233. Now, what did we do? To go from x squared equals some number to x equals some number, the step was to take the square root of both sides. You don't have to actually write that, but I'm showing that here to make it really clear for those of you who are seeing this for the first time. So, I need to take the square root of 233, and this time we're not going to get a whole number as our answer, so we're going to have to use the calculator here. So let's do that. Let's find a square root of 233. And if you have a CAS calculator, if you just press enter, you might get that as your answer. This is called an exact value. We don't want an exact value, we want a decimal approximation. So what you need to do is, instead of pressing enter on the CAS, if that's what you're using, you should press control enter instead. So control enter, and you'll notice here it's given us the digits of the decimal representation. So x is equal to 15.2643375, and that number actually goes on forever. It never stops, and there's no pattern. Now, if we give a decimal approximation, we have to round it off somewhere. In a test, you'll be told how much to round it to. So here, I've asked for 2 decimal places. So I just want 2 digits after the decimal point. So I need to write down the 2 digits after the decimal point. And I need to decide, by looking at the next digit, the 3rd digit, whether to round up or down. So looking at the number 4 here, I'm noticing that it's less than 5. If the number is less than 5, I round down to 15.26. If, however, the digit that I highlighted was 5 or larger, I would round my answer up to 15.27. So I'll just write a comment here. If the next digit is 5 to 9, round up. If the next digit is 0 to 4, round down. And you might also have a question about this. What is this symbol about? Why is it curly? This means approximately equal to. because I took a number that went on forever and I rounded it. I approximated it. Okay, so it's no longer equal to this, it's approximately equal to it. Okay, in the next video, we will solve for one of the other two sides, A and B. See you then.